everyone. Welcome to the first episode of my new show called A Bit of the Binge, a TV nerdery show. Basically, what this show is I've already got reviews for movies, I've got reviews for music. Figured it's about time I get into something that's probably actually bigger than the two of those in my life anymore, and that's television reviews. Now, one of the things before actually getting into the show that I'm going to be talking about today is that binge watching is a fairly new concept, and it's something that is actually kind of an interesting development in recent years that has made television actually better in a way. And when I say television, I don't mean necessarily shows on CBS or NBC. I mean, watching a television show anymore can be like watching a movie because of the ability to binge watch it. And because of the ability to binge watch it, producers and showrunners are actually tailoring their shows to be something that somebody could watch in a weekend, basically. Netflix kind of, revolutionized that when they released new seasons of their television shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, which were two of the first ones that they did, and having those shows be the entire season released at once, giving people the opportunity to watch it. Because before, shows, it was harder to binge watch a show because you'd either have to wait for a marathon on television where they would do reruns and show the entire thing, in order in, one day or over a weekend or something, or you'd have to buy like a DVD or something. Even before that, it was even harder to get full episodes of shows. You would just catch, single reruns. But because of the way things are now, with binge watching being a much more popular way of consuming television, the shows themselves have also changed. Whereas things used to be more episodic, where you just have individual episodes of, a 1 hour or half an hour, contained story based on whatever the show was, that, the next episode might have something to do with the one before it, but more than likely it was going to be on its own. There were fewer, overarching story, things that just continued to go on. Unless it was, of course, a soap opera, which is, just a long-running narrative. So TV has definitely changed in that way, and more shows are going to this format of, in a season, telling a contained story as opposed to doing it episodically. So it's a serial show versus episodic show. And out of that, we've gotten probably some of the best television shows we've ever seen. And, there were some shows that kind of came on, right before binge watching was a big thing. Shows like Lost and 24 and Alias, some of those great shows of the early 2000s probably could have been even better if, binge watching were, a big thing back then. But the problem is when you have a show like 24 that's 24 episodes long, binge watching it is a little bit tricky. So now, most shows that come out in these sort of formats that are meant to be consumed, in a binge-watching scenario, most of these shows only have seasons that are anywhere from 10 to 13 episodes long. So you do have a much smaller pool to pull from, but at the same time, they also cut out a lot of the excess. You might still get great character development, great storyline progression without resorting to, 10 episodes that just kind of meander and linger. You're going to be able to tell that contained story much better with, a less amount of time, but more focused attention. And that's where you get shows like Orange is the New Black, or even some of the comedies like Archer and BoJack Horseman, which, really do, even though they're animated, they do have that same kind of mentality of they're a serial show trying to tell this story over, the course of a season. And so with, Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and all these outlets basically releasing entire seasons, it is definitely changing how we're consuming television. And it's good and bad because, as much as, we love a show like Game of Thrones, where, at the end of a week, they give us this big, spoiler, this big, painful moment. And it's like, oh my God, I can't wait till next week. There's that excitement, that build-up. It also forces episodes to end with something like that to keep people engaged in trying to get to the next episode. Whereas with a show like, again, Orange is the New Black, it's something that they don't necessarily need to end every episode with this huge moment. It's something that they can continually build over the course of 13 episodes. And so that 13 episode season is just one story. It's not, a series of shocking moments. It's one story, and it just makes it all the better. But that's kind of why I'm doing this show, is to talk about these shows that you should be binge watching, or shouldn't, if there's something I end up binge watching that you shouldn't be watching. But these are definitely shows that, in binge watching them, kind of shows what they really are. And today I'm going to start off with something easy because it's something that people have seen, and there will be spoilers. Granted, not too many. I'm going to try to keep the big spoilers down to a minimum, but there are definitely some spoilers from this season that, because, to explain best this show, they kind of do need to talk about some of the, the things that happen. So today I'm going to be talking about Orange is the New Black Season 4, which is the most recent season. It was released back in June. Orange is the New Black is one of those interesting shows. It's one that actually got me to reinvest in Netflix and go back to Netflix because, I wanted to see this show about a women's prison. It's kind of a comedy. It's from the creator of... It's from Genji Kohan, who created Weeds, which was a really good show up until the last couple seasons, because it was funny, but it also had drama and, that human element that we're always looking for. So it was an interesting combination. So I wanted to see what she did with Orange is the New Black. And with that, we get a story about a prison, a women's prison, that focuses on Piper Chapman. So if you haven't watched the first 3 seasons, just as a quick recap, Piper, played by Taylor Schilling, basically goes into prison because of, this drug deal that she was a part of, basically drug trafficking, that, she was brought into this world by her kind of lover, Alex Voss, who's played by Laura Prepon of That 70s Show fame. And so now she's in prison, and she's trying to navigate that in sort of her, because she's definitely an entitled, rich white girl, and now that she's in prison, which isn't a supermax, it's definitely like a, minimum security prison, but, as she tries to navigate her way through this, she meets all the different characters and gets into a lot of, bad situations because it's a world she obviously doesn't fully understand or grasp until about the 3rd season. And even in the 3rd season, you could say that as she starts to transform into somebody who's accepting her station now that she's in prison, she still doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And the way that season 3 ends, basically she kind of becomes this top dog she becomes top dog, is at least the perception you get when season 3 ends, is now she's the one who's, the person to challenge in prison. But the reality is that is not the case. And when season 4 opens, basically no one knows what she did. No one cares what she did, because at the end of season 3, there was a gaping hole in the fence and everybody decided to go swimming in the lake. So while they're going swimming in the lake, a whole new rash of prisoners are being brought into the prison, as well as the new prison guards, because at the end of season 3 as well, the prison guards who we had seen over the past 3 seasons were basically on strike and basically saying they're not going to do what, they don't want to do what they're being told to do. And ultimately they quit. They just resign their post. So now they have a prison without guards, but the new guards who show up are extraordinarily aggressive. And the guy who basically is in charge of this is played by Brad William Henke, who, we've seen him in a number of roles. He showed up in Lost in the later seasons as somebody who was trying to find the island, clearly had some, information on the island and, trying to do that. But he shows up here as this very hardcore, very hard-nosed guard who his goal is to get the prisoners in line and to remind them they are in prison. This is not a free-for-all. So when they get everybody back in, they see, okay, now we've got twice as many prisoners as we had before, so now we have to start doubling people up. And so now you have this situation where this prison, which was somewhat, relaxed in a sense, and everybody had their own space, now they're just dumping more and more people into it. And when they do this, Piper's character, she wants to be, she wants to exert her dominance, but at the same time, there's other groups who are, especially some of the newer people who are coming in, they want to challenge her, for being, and now you start actually getting the show has always dealt with race as, one of its key themes, and in this season they definitely show a little bit more of that fracturing, where you have, the black group, you have the Hispanic, groups, and then you have kind of the white groups. And in this one especially, they really do have this stark contrast, because as Piper sees it, the Hispanic group is starting to, form up a gang, and she doesn't want a gang because she sees that as challenging her dominance. But in doing so, she riles up a number of prisoners who essentially create their own white power movement. So now you have this white supremacy movement fighting against, the black group and the Hispanic group, particularly the Hispanic group. While the black group, led by, the Cindy and Tasty and, what's her name? Poussey, as well as Crazy Eyes, one of the greatest characters ever created on television. Basically, now they are, just trying to, obviously survive in this new minefield of, race issues. All the while, the prison is becoming more and more strict. And ultimately, Piper gets this into the situation where now that she's created this white power movement, she ultimately makes a mistake that costs basically the Hispanic group deals them a pretty big loss. But in retaliation, they they actually burn a swastika into her arm as kind of this saying, we're stuck in here we're stuck in prison, and we're not going to let you forget who really has this power. And so they kind of take over from where Piper left off, and now Piper is basically broken at this point. Again, it's something we haven't really seen from her over the past 2 seasons, as she's tried to build herself up and become accustomed to her situation in this prison. Ultimately, she's broken down again at that point, and she tries to find solace in Red, who has always been this just rock in the in the prison. But Red is also dealing with her own situation where she finds out that at the end of season 3, Alex Voz's character is basically confronted by a hitman who made it into the prison to kill her, basically, to finish her off. But in the beginning of season 4, with the help of a character played by Lori Petty, they actually kill this man. Alex Voz and Lori Petty's character kill this guy and just cut up the body and all that stuff. But Lori Petty's character is kind of unhinged. She has a lot of she has some mental issues that makes her think that she's seeing things. She's very paranoid and all that. So they have to say, okay, do we need to actually deal with her to make sure that this situation goes away? And ultimately, it is found out, because as the prison gets more strict, what they do is they force all the prisoners to do manual labor in the name of education. So it's just a way to get cheap labor, calling it education. So while the prisoners are doing this, they actually dig up the body of the guy that they killed. And when they do that, now it becomes this okay, who killed this guy, and how did it basically happen? So the prison becomes even more locked down and strict. All the while, the guards there's one guard in particular who's becoming more and more aggressive with the prisoners, making them do really disturbing things just for his own, to get his own rocks off. And ultimately, what it comes down to is this almost riot situation where the different groups are willing to come together for a moment just as a challenge to these guards who are, essentially taking away their civil rights. Even though they're prisoners, their civil rights are being violated constantly in this prison. And when they take a stand for it, the guards respond with some pretty severe violence. And as a result of that, one of the characters is killed in the process. It's an accidental death, and it's at the hands of somebody who definitely was not one of the more vicious characters, actually portrayed as kind of this innocent person who just is clueless, who just does not have a direction in his own life. And he accidentally kills this prisoner. And from that, you get the final episode of this season, which is arguably the best episode of Orange is the New Black ever, which is saying something, because there have been quite a few very good episodes of this show, but I think this one, they absolutely nailed down the complexity of a situation like this, where a prisoner is killed, and when the the administration tries to work through it and figure out how they're going to handle it. Ultimately, what they do is they push the blame onto the prisoners themselves and leave the staff essentially innocent in this whole situation. And of course, when they do that, it incites another riot, and the season ends with this basically this new riot that ultimately ends with one of the prisoners getting hold of a handgun, which was illegally smuggled into the prison by this guard who is just absolutely insane. So that's basically the season in a nutshell. And here's kind of how I felt, because this is one of those shows that I got addicted to very easily because of how well they portrayed their characters. You have such a wealth of characters in the show. I mean, Taylor Schilling is definitely the main character, but as the seasons have gone on, they've given more light to other characters. And the actors and actresses who play these roles, like Lea DeLaria, Uzo Adaba, Natasha Lyonne, Danielle Brooks, Adrienne C. Moore, Taryn Manning, Selenis Leva. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she's fantastic, especially in season 3. She was amazing. Laverne Cox, Samira Wiley, Kate Mulgrew. I mean, the cast of this show is fantastic. And all of the characters and all the actresses play their characters so well. And that's what's made this show so good. But there's also an element of this show that is just a little almost too ridiculous to accept. And this season started off with a few of those scenarios where it was almost so ridiculous that I was like, I don't know if I can buy this. When they kill this guy and bury his body, it just seemed too clean. It's like, oh, done, got it, we're done, and then just kind of forget about it. Even though there's this like emotional weight that particularly Laura Prepon's character has, there's really no consequence from it at the beginning, and it doesn't seem like there will be. And actually, the moment that it does seem like there might be some consequence to it, basically Lori Petty's character admits to killing this guy, but the social worker shrink guy basically in the prison basically thinks that she's delusional and basically takes her as that and doesn't think that there's actually a body in the garden, essentially. So they get off scot-free because they think that this woman is crazy. And at that moment, I was really worried about the direction of the season. But fortunately, they do come back around, and it does come back up. They don't just let it sit, and actually comes out in a big way, because they dig up this body just kind of by accident, and then voila, now you've got this new conflict in there. And they do that really well, particularly with the characters, of just showing this is how severe this situation has become. And the season, the other challenge with this show is that there are so many characters and so many good characters that when they start a season, it might focus on one or two people, and then throughout the season most of the focus is on just a selection of them, not the whole group. I mean, there's a few little like side stories that go on, but for the most part, the story focuses on a few select characters, and everyone else is just kind of there watching, which works. It does work at times, but at other times you're like, well, I really got attached to this character, and I've only seen her like once in the last 3 episodes, or her storyline is just kind of just moving along nicely, but nothing really spectacular. So it does have that problem of just maybe having too many characters. But I mean, overall, this season, I mean, was universally acclaimed, and I can definitely see why, because in terms of where the show has been and where it's going, I like how this season wrapped up versus previous seasons, which had a very satisfying ending, had something that was like the end of season 3, even though there was a cliffhanger, for the most part, it was like, well, everybody else is doing fine. There's just this one fear that Alex Voss might get killed. At the end of season 2, Rosa escapes and runs over V with a van. I mean, it's like the endings do wrap things up pretty nicely in this show, whereas this season, they end it with some they ended with pure chaos, and that's what I was really hoping to see, because I felt that this is a show about prison. This is a show about people who are in a terrible situation, and whether their lives that got them there, justifies anger or anything like that, it doesn't really matter. The fact is they are in prison, which is not supposed to be a necessarily good situation, and a lot of the tension among them has been muted. But now, the way that this season ended, a lot of that tension is now out in the open. And when you think that there's this moment of alliance of everybody working together, it falls apart. But when at the very end they do come together, and it's not necessarily in unity, it's more just in mutual hatred and mutual anarchy. And the way that the season ends is it's perfect. It has a perfect ending. Overall, I'd say this season was a little bit shaky. It has some great moments. It has a absolutely heartbreaking moment. It has a few heartbreaking moments, but losing that one character, again, I'm not going to say who, but losing that character who's been on the show for so long was a challenge, because it's a character that didn't necessarily deserve the punishment that she got, and you're certainly going to miss her in future seasons. But also, she got a pretty good arc this season. As sort of this, girl who idolized. Basically, Blair Brown comes into the show playing kind of like a Martha Stewart type character. Somebody who, a celebrity who comes in and, is obviously very well known, but this character kind of attaches to her and has an interesting storyline there. But then, obviously, her fate is pretty much sealed. It's an interesting show. It's an interesting season. In terms of where I'd rank it on, where on the show I'd probably rank it, I'd probably put it, right around season 2. It's certainly one of the better of the 4 seasons that they've had, but it does, especially at the beginning, leaves a lot to be desired. And especially when you have a show with so many great characters, balance is the key. And I know that they do as good a job as they can with balance, because you could say I attach myself to every single character on the list. Pretty much anybody in this show, I love watching them. So how can you have a 13-episode season and give everybody fair due? It's not possible. But so they do have to pick their battles. But at the same time, keeping the story progressed and keeping it fresh and interesting. I think this season they definitely did make a turn in the season, in the tone of the show, in the direction of the show, that I think is going to help it moving forward. So if you're in the mood to binge something, absolutely binge Orange is the New Black, especially getting to season 4. If you've already seen season 4, let me know in the comments what you think about it, if you agree or disagree that it was a good season. Let me know if there's some other aspects of the show that I missed, because the show itself is very diverse and very complicated at times, but it's also meant to be somewhat lighthearted. At the end, at the end of the day, it is still kind of a drama comedy, so it does try to keep those lighter moments throughout there, but more and more it's starting to embrace that darker side and the more dramatic side, which works for other shows much better. And in this show, hopefully in season 5, maybe we'll see that continue. So let me know in the comments what you think. That's my review of Orange is the New Black Season 4, and thanks again for watching this new show, Bit of the Binge. It's going to be probably a once-a-month show, but look forward to it, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to keep up on all of my YouTube videos by clicking subscribe, and if you're already a subscriber, thank you, and you rock. Also visit my homepage at dkessner.com, where you can find out about all my various other projects, including my written works. How about that? You can also find me at my social media handles, so drop in and say hi. And again, thank you so much for all your support. Love you.